She thought she was living a fairy tale when she married tech mogul Marcus Wellington in a ceremony that cost more than most people's houses. But 3 days into their honeymoon in the Maldives, she discovered a text message that would destroy everything she believed about love and turn her into one of the wealthiest divorcees in history. What happened next shocked the entire world and proved that sometimes the best revenge is living well. Stay until the end, because the final twist will leave you absolutely speechless. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Emma Rodriguez had always believed that hard work and determination could overcome any obstacle. At 27, she had built her small graphic design studio from nothing, working 16-hour days in her cramped studio apartment, surviving on instant noodles and sheer willpower. Her clients were mostly local small businesses who couldn't afford the big agencies. But Emma poured her heart into every logo, every website, every business card she designed. She wasn't making millions, but she was proud of what she had accomplished entirely on her own. The morning that changed everything started like any other Wednesday. Emma was hunched over her computer, fine-tuning a restaurant logo design, when her building's ancient elevator groaned to a stop on her floor. She barely glanced up as footsteps echoed in the hallway, assuming it was Mrs. Patterson from next door returning from her grocery shopping. But then came a knock on her door that sounded different somehow, more confident and purposeful than the usual delivery person or neighbor. When Emma opened the door, she found herself face-to-face with a man who looked like he had stepped out of a business magazine cover. Tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, with dark hair perfectly styled and the kind of watch that suggested success. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, warm brown eyes that seemed genuinely apologetic rather than entitled. Marcus Wellington introduced himself with an embarrassed smile, explaining that he had been trying to find the offices of Wellington Digital Solutions, a tech startup that had recently moved into the building. Somehow, he had gotten turned around and ended up on the wrong floor entirely. Emma couldn't help but laugh at the irony of a tech CEO getting lost in a building that probably had the simplest layout in downtown Seattle. What should have been a 5-minute interaction of giving directions turned into an hour-long conversation that flowed as naturally as if they had known each other for years. Marcus seemed genuinely interested in her work, asking thoughtful questions about her design process and even offering suggestions for expanding her client base. Unlike other successful men Emma had met, he didn't talk down to her or make her feel small for running a one-person operation. When he finally left to find his actual destination, Marcus paused at the door and asked if she would be interested in grabbing coffee sometime. Not as a business proposition, he clarified with a grin, but because he found himself not wanting their conversation to end. Emma surprised herself by saying yes immediately, something about his genuine warmth making her usual guardedness melt away. Their first official date was at a tiny coffee shop in Pike Place Market, far from the upscale restaurants Marcus probably usually frequented. He arrived in jeans and a simple sweater, looking more relaxed and approachable than the polished executive who had knocked on her door. They talked for hours about everything from their childhood dreams to their biggest fears, sharing stories and laughing until the cafe owner had to gently remind them that closing time had passed. Emma learned that Marcus had grown up in a middle-class family in Portland, his father, a high school math teacher, and his mother, a nurse. He had worked his way through college, starting his first tech company in his garage with his best friend from university. Success hadn't come overnight, and he spoke candidly about the failures and setbacks that had nearly broke him before Wellington Digital finally took off. Despite his current wealth, he had never forgotten what it felt like to worry about making ends meet. Over the following weeks, Marcus courted Emma with a persistence that was both charming and respectful. He would surprise her with her favorite Thai takeout when she was working late, but never made her feel guilty for prioritizing her work. He attended her small business networking events, not as the successful tech mogul offering to solve everyone's problems, but as Emma's supportive boyfriend who was genuinely interested in learning about different industries. The turning point came during their first weekend getaway together, a spontaneous trip to a cozy bed and breakfast in the San Juan Islands. Emma had been hesitant about the expense, but Marcus assured her it was his treat, and something about the way he said it made her feel cherished rather than patronized. They spent their days hiking coastal trails and their evenings curled up by the fireplace, talking about their dreams for the future. It was there, watching the sunset paint the water in brilliant oranges and pinks, that Marcus first told Emma he loved her. The words came out naturally, without drama or grand gestures. Just a simple truth shared between two people who had found something rare and beautiful together. When Emma whispered the words back, she felt a sense of completeness she had never experienced before. As the relationship deepened over the next year, Emma began to see glimpses of Marcus's world that both impressed and sometimes intimidated her. His company had grown exponentially, and he was being courted by major investors and tech giants. Business trips became more frequent, and the casual jeans and sweaters were increasingly replaced by tailored suits and expensive watches. But Marcus made every effort to keep their relationship grounded in the values that had brought them together. Instead of fancy restaurants, he would cook dinner for her in his surprisingly modest downtown condo. Rather than expensive jewelry, he would surprise her with small, thoughtful gifts, like a vintage design book he had found at a used bookstore, or a succulent for her increasingly crowded windowsill garden. Emma's friends and family adored Marcus from the moment they met him. At her cousin's birthday party, he spent the entire evening playing video games with her teenage nephews, patiently teaching them coding basics and listening to their ideas for their own future startups. Her parents, initially skeptical about their daughter dating someone so wealthy, were won over by his genuine interest in her father's carpentry work and his willingness to help her mother with the dishes after dinner. The proposal came on the anniversary of their first coffee date, back at the same tiny cafe where they had talked until closing time. Marcus had arranged with the owner to have the place to themselves for an hour after closing, with candles flickering on every table and their favorite barista ready to make their usual orders. When he got down on one knee, pulling out a ring that was elegant and beautiful without being ostentatiously expensive, Emma realized that this was the moment she had been unconsciously waiting for her entire life. The engagement ring was perfect, a vintage-inspired solitaire that looked like it had been designed specifically for her hand. Marcus explained that he had worked with a local jeweler, describing Emma's style and personality until they created something that captured her essence. It was thoughtful and personal in a way that made Emma's heart swell with love and gratitude for this man who truly saw and understood her. Planning their wedding became a delicate balance between Marcus's world and Emma's preferences. He could have afforded any venue in the world, but Emma wanted something intimate and meaningful. They settled on a beautiful historic mansion overlooking Puget Sound, elegant enough to satisfy Marcus's business associates, but warm and personal enough to make Emma feel comfortable. The guest list included Marcus's tech industry colleagues and investors, alongside Emma's design clients and college friends. Emma worried about the mixing of their two very different social circles, but Marcus assured her that anyone worth knowing would appreciate the people who were important to her. He was right, and their wedding day felt like a perfect celebration of two lives coming together rather than a corporate networking event. Emma's wedding dress was a dream come true, a custom gown designed by a local Seattle designer who had started her career around the same time Emma launched her own business. It was elegant and timeless without being flashy, with delicate lace details that Emma had input on throughout the design process. Walking down the aisle toward Marcus, seeing his face light up with joy and love, Emma felt like the luckiest woman alive. The ceremony itself was everything Emma had dreamed of, personal and heartfelt, with vows they had written themselves. Marcus promised to support her dreams while building their own together, to never let success change who they were at their core, and to love her with the same genuine affection he had shown from that very first confused knock on her door. Emma's vows spoke of partnership, mutual respect, and building a life based on shared values rather than shared bank accounts. Their reception was magical, held in the mansion's garden as the summer sun set over the water. Emma's design background showed in every detail, from the locally sourced flowers to the custom lighting that made everything glow with warmth. Marcus had surprised her by hiring a small string quartet that played all of their favorite songs, including the jazz standard that had been playing in the cafe during their first date. The best part of the evening was seeing how naturally their two worlds had blended. Emma's college roommate was deep in conversation with one of Marcus's investors about sustainable business practices, while Marcus's business partner was getting photography tips from Emma's cousin who worked as a freelance photographer. It felt like the beginning of not just a marriage, but a real merging of their lives and communities. As they prepared to leave for their honeymoon in the Maldives, Emma felt a contentment and excitement she had never experienced before. Everything about their relationship had felt right from the beginning, and their wedding day had only confirmed that they were building something beautiful and lasting together. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The future stretched ahead of them full of possibilities, business success, maybe children someday, and definitely a lifetime of the kind of partnership they had already begun to build. Marcus had planned their honeymoon with the same thoughtfulness he brought to everything else in their relationship. The resort was exclusive and beautiful, but he had chosen it because it offered both luxury and privacy, a place where they could truly relax and enjoy being newlyweds without the pressures of their respective careers. Emma packed her favorite books and her sketchpad, looking forward to 2 weeks of nothing but sun, relaxation, and celebrating the beginning of their married life. The night before they left, as Emma was finishing her packing, Marcus wrapped his arms around her from behind and whispered how excited he was to start this new chapter of their lives together. Emma leaned back against him, feeling completely secure and loved, never imagining that in just a few days, everything she believed about their perfect love story would come crashing down around her. The Maldives resort was everything the brochures had promised and more. Crystal clear, turquoise waters stretched endlessly toward the horizon. Their overwater villa felt like something from a dream, and Emma had never felt more relaxed or happy in her entire life. The first 2 days of their honeymoon were pure bliss, filled with lazy mornings in bed, snorkeling in the coral reef, and romantic dinners on their private deck under a canopy of stars. Marcus seemed different here, more relaxed than she had seen him in months. The constant buzz of his phone had quieted to occasional chirps, and he actually seemed to be disconnecting from the business world that usually demanded his attention. They spent hours talking about their future, making plans for renovating the house they wanted to buy, discussing the possibility of Emma expanding her design business, and dreaming about the family they hoped to start someday. On their third morning, Emma woke to find Marcus already up, sitting on their deck with his laptop and phone, his jaw tense in a way that immediately concerned her. When she approached with 2 cups of coffee, he quickly closed the laptop screen and gave her a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Everything okay?" Emma asked, settling into the chair beside him and enjoying the gentle morning breeze off the water. "Just some minor issues with the Shanghai deal," Marcus replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Nothing that can't wait until we get back home." But as the day progressed, Emma noticed Marcus becoming increasingly distracted. His phone seemed to vibrate constantly, and though he tried to hide it, she caught him checking messages during their lunch, and even during their couple's massage at the resort spa. The carefree man who had been snorkeling with her just yesterday was being replaced by the stressed executive she thought they had left behind in Seattle. That evening, while Marcus was in the shower, his phone lit up on the nightstand with an incoming call. Emma glanced over automatically and felt her stomach drop when she saw the name on the screen, Victoria Chen. She recognized the name immediately as Marcus's head of business development, a brilliant and strikingly beautiful woman who had been instrumental in several of Wellington Digital's biggest deals. The call went to voicemail, but within seconds, a text message appeared on the screen. Emma wasn't trying to snoop, but the preview was visible, and what she saw made her blood run cold. "Missing you already. Can't wait until you're back and we can stop pretending." Emma's hands began to shake as she stared at the phone, her mind racing to find an innocent explanation for words that seemed to have only one possible meaning. Maybe Victoria was talking about a business deal they had to keep secret. Maybe it was about some surprise project for the company. But even as Emma tried to rationalize what she had seen, her heart was pounding with a dread that felt all too real. When Marcus emerged from the bathroom, Emma was sitting on the edge of the bed, his phone in her hands and tears streaming down her face. He stopped dead when he saw her expression, his own face going pale with what looked unmistakably like guilt. "Emma, I can explain," he said immediately, which only confirmed her worst fears. "How long?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How long have you been having an affair with Victoria?" Marcus sat down heavily in the chair across from her, running his hands through his damp hair in a gesture Emma had once found endearing, but now seemed like a tell of his deception. For a long moment he said nothing, and in that silence Emma felt the last of her hopes die. "It started about 6 months ago," he finally admitted, his voice hollow. "It wasn't supposed to happen. We were working late on the Beijing expansion and she was going through a divorce, and I was stressed about the wedding planning and the pressure from investors and what?" Emma interrupted, her voice gaining strength even as her heart shattered. "And you decided that justified cheating on me? On our wedding day? During our honeymoon?" Marcus looked up at her with eyes full of what appeared to be genuine remorse. But Emma no longer trusted her ability to read him. "I tried to end it before the wedding. I swear I did. But Victoria threatened to quit and take the Beijing deal with her to our biggest competitor. Wellington Digital would have lost millions, Emma. I couldn't let that happen." Emma stared at him in disbelief. "So you married me anyway? You stood there and promised to love and honor me while you were sleeping with another woman?" "I love you," Marcus said desperately, reaching toward her. But Emma pulled away. "What I have with Victoria, it's not love. It's complicated and messy and wrong. But it's not what we have." "What we have?" Emma laughed bitterly. "What we have is built on lies. What we have is you making a fool of me in front of everyone we know. What we have is you destroying our marriage before it even really began." The next few hours were a blur of painful revelations and desperate attempts at justification from Marcus. Victoria wasn't just his business partner and mistress, she was pregnant. The Shanghai deal was partly a cover for setting up a life with her in Asia, where their relationship could continue without the scrutiny of Seattle's tech community. The frequent business trips over the past months hadn't all been business. Emma felt like she was watching her entire life collapse from the outside, as if this was happening to someone else. The man she had fallen in love with, married, and trusted with her heart and future, had been living a double life so elaborate and calculated that she wondered if anything about their relationship had been real. "Did you ever love me?" Emma asked as dawn broke over the water, both of them exhausted from a night of terrible truths. Marcus looked at her with what seemed like genuine pain. "I do love you, Emma. That's what makes this so complicated. If I could go back and change everything, I would. But I can't, and now I have to figure out how to handle the situation with Victoria and the baby." "No," Emma said quietly, standing up from the bed where they had been sitting on opposite sides like strangers. "You don't have to figure out anything with me. I'm done." The flight home from the Maldives was the longest 8 hours of Emma's life. Marcus had tried to convince her to stay and work things out. But Emma knew there was nothing left to salvage. She moved out of his condo and into a small furnished apartment, taking only her clothes and personal belongings. The wedding gifts, the engagement ring, the shared life they had been building, all of it felt tainted now. Emma threw herself into her work with a vengeance, taking on more clients than she could reasonably handle, and working 16-hour days just to avoid thinking about the wreckage of her marriage. Her friends and family were supportive, but clearly struggled to understand how someone as smart and intuitive as Emma had missed the signs of Marcus's deception. The divorce proceedings began 3 months after their return from the Maldives. Emma had hired Jennifer Walsh, one of Seattle's most respected divorce attorneys, on the recommendation of a client who had gone through her own high-profile divorce. Jennifer was smart, tough, and had a reputation for protecting her clients' interests against wealthy spouses who thought they could control the narrative. "Emma," Jennifer said during their first meeting, "I need you to understand something. Marcus is worth significantly more than you probably realize. Wellington Digital has been valued at over $2 billion in recent investor meetings. As his wife, even for just 3 months, you're entitled to a substantial settlement." Emma had been so focused on the emotional devastation of the betrayal that she hadn't really considered the financial implications of divorcing someone as wealthy as Marcus had become. She had signed a prenuptial agreement, but Jennifer explained that infidelity clauses could potentially invalidate much of its protection, especially given that Marcus's affair had begun before their marriage. What Emma discovered during the legal discovery process shocked her even more than the original betrayal. Marcus hadn't just been having an affair. He had been systematically hiding assets and manipulating company valuations to minimize what Emma would be entitled to in a divorce. Bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, property purchases under shell companies, and stock transfers to family members all painted a picture of a man who had been planning for this outcome long before Emma found that text message. The revelation that Marcus had been preparing for their divorce even before they were married was somehow more devastating than learning about Victoria. It meant that their entire relationship had been, if not a lie, then at least something Marcus had never fully committed to. Emma had been Plan A until Plan A became inconvenient. and then she became the obstacle to be managed and minimized. Jennifer's investigation uncovered something else that changed the entire dynamic of the divorce. Victoria Chen hadn't just been Marcus's mistress. She had been feeding information about Wellington Digital's deals to competitors in exchange for promises of executive positions at rival firms. The Shanghai deal that Marcus claimed he couldn't risk losing was actually a setup designed to steal Wellington Digital's intellectual property and client base. Marcus had been played just as thoroughly as Emma, but his response to being deceived was very different from hers. While Emma had immediately ended their marriage upon discovering his betrayal, Marcus had tried to minimize the damage to his company by offering Victoria increasingly generous payoffs to keep quiet about their affair and her corporate espionage. The scandal broke when one of Victoria's former colleagues at a competing firm came forward with evidence of her industrial espionage, seeking whistleblower protection and a reduced sentence for his own involvement. The story hit TechCrunch on a Tuesday morning and had spread to every major news outlet by evening. Suddenly, Emma's private heartbreak became a public spectacle, with reporters camping outside her apartment and her phone ringing constantly with interview requests. Emma refused all media requests, but the story took on a life of its own. Business journalists were fascinated by the corporate espionage angle, while entertainment reporters focused on the love triangle that had brought down one of Seattle's most promising tech companies. Social media was equally divided between sympathy for Emma as the betrayed wife and criticism of her for seeking what some saw as an excessive divorce settlement. The divorce settlement negotiations became a media circus. Marcus's legal team tried to portray Emma as a gold digger who had married him for his money and was now trying to capitalize on his misfortune. Emma's team countered with evidence of Marcus's deliberate deception and financial manipulation, arguing that Emma was entitled to compensation not just for the failed marriage, but for the damage to her own business and reputation. The breakthrough came when Jennifer's forensic accountants discovered that Marcus had been using Wellington Digital's resources to fund his relationship with Victoria, including the apartment he had rented for her, the trips they had taken together, and even the private investigators he had hired to monitor Emma's activities during their engagement. These expenses, totaling nearly $10 million, constituted both marital waste and corporate fraud. Judge Patricia Morrison, who presided over the divorce case, was known for her no-nonsense approach to high-asset divorces and her particular intolerance for financial deception. During the final settlement hearing, she made her feelings about Marcus's behavior crystal clear. "Mr. Wellington," Judge Morrison said, "you have demonstrated a pattern of deception and financial manipulation that goes far beyond typical marital infidelity. You married Ms. Rodriguez under false pretenses, used marital and corporate assets to fund an extramarital affair, and then attempted to hide your assets to avoid your legal obligations to your wife. This court will not reward such behavior." The final settlement was more than Emma had ever dreamed possible. She was awarded 40% of Marcus's stake in Wellington Digital, valued at over $800 million, plus their shared real estate holdings, including the downtown condo and the mountain cabin they had purchased together. The prenuptial agreement was thrown out entirely due to Marcus's fraud, and Emma was awarded additional punitive damages for emotional distress and damage to her business reputation. But the most satisfying part of the settlement wasn't the money. Judge Morrison also ordered Marcus to issue a public apology, acknowledging his deception and absolving Emma of any blame for the marriage's failure. The statement, which ran as a full-page ad in the Seattle Times and was posted on Wellington Digital's website, was a complete vindication of Emma's position and a public humiliation for Marcus. The internet's reaction to the settlement was explosive. The story trended on Twitter for 3 days, with hashtags like Billionaire Divorce and Karma's Real generating millions of tweets. Financial news shows debated whether the settlement was fair or excessive, while relationship experts used Emma's story as a cautionary tale about prenuptial agreements and trust in marriage. Emma found herself an overnight celebrity in a way she had never wanted or expected. Photographers followed her to coffee shops, reporters analyzed her clothing choices, and complete strangers felt entitled to comment on her personal life. The attention was overwhelming and often intrusive, but Emma was surprised to find that much of it was positive. Women around the world saw her as a symbol of someone who had refused to be a victim and had fought back against a powerful man who had tried to control and diminish her. With her newfound wealth, Emma could have retired and lived a life of luxury, but instead, she decided to use her resources to make a difference. She established the Emma Rodriguez Foundation, focused on supporting women entrepreneurs and victims of domestic financial abuse. She also expanded her design business into a full-service creative agency, hiring other talented women who had been overlooked by larger firms and creating the kind of supportive, ethical workplace she wished had existed when she was starting out. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Emma received an unexpected visitor at her new office. Marcus stood in her reception area looking older and more tired than she had ever seen him, clearly hoping for a private conversation. Emma agreed to see him, curious about what he could possibly have to say after everything that had happened. "I know I have no right to be here," Marcus began, "but I needed to tell you something. Victoria wasn't pregnant. The whole thing was a lie designed to manipulate me into giving her more inside information about the company. I lost everything for someone who was never even carrying my child." Emma looked at the man she had once loved and felt nothing but pity. "I'm sorry that happened to you, Marcus, but it doesn't change anything between us." "I know," Marcus said quietly. "I just wanted you to know that you were right about everything. You deserve so much better than what I gave you, and I hope someday you can find the happiness you always should have had." After Marcus left, Emma sat in her office looking out at the Seattle skyline and reflecting on how much her life had changed. The betrayal that had seemed like the end of her world had actually been the beginning of something better. She had discovered strength she didn't know she possessed, built a business that reflected her values, and found a way to turn her pain into purpose. The best revenge, Emma realized, wasn't the money or the public vindication, though both had been satisfying. The best revenge was building a life so fulfilling and meaningful that her ex-husband's betrayal became just one chapter in a much larger story of success and happiness. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened, because it forces you to discover who you really are when everything else is stripped away. Emma never remarried, but she found love again in unexpected places. In her work, in her friendships, in the women she mentored through her foundation, and in the knowledge that she had faced the worst kind of betrayal and emerged stronger, wiser, and more successful than she had ever imagined possible. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.